That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about The Woman King, the fifth film directed by Gina Prince-Bythewood, which premiered at the 2022 Toronto International Film Festival before Sony Pictures premieres it September 16th, 2022.
I know Gina directed Love and Basketball.
Her debut, which is part of the Criterion Collection.
Which I recently watched from the Criterion Collection.
Is excellent.
Yes.
I know you're a fan of her sophomore film, The Secret Life of Bees.
Oh, yes.
Which was a date night film.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, I think I also... Oh, no. Never mind.
Remember, because that was right after Jennifer Hudson and her tragedy with her family.
That's right. That's right.
And then, I also am a fan of Beyond the Lights, which I don't think you've seen, with Gugu Mbatha Raw and Nate Parker. And then I wasn't a fan of her last film, The Old Guard.
Yeah.
But I'm very happy to say that I did highly enjoy this film.
I think this movie is very good. Mm-hmm. So good job. Okay, the basic story. West Africa, 1823. There are two kingdoms at odds. The Dahomey and the Oyo. Mm-hmm. Okay, so Viola Davis is like a general for the Dahomey kingdom, where they have like women soldiers.
Yeah, female warriors known as Izogie.
Yes. So the main conflict between these two kingdoms is that the new general of the Oyo, he's very aggressive, and both kingdoms are selling black Africans into the slave trade. The Dahomey recognize that that's not necessarily what they should be doing, and they're really only selling prisoners, whereas the Oyo are like, this is a business for them. But it seems like the king of the Dahomey, played by
Boyega, King Ghezo,
he's very open to the idea of stopping this altogether and finding other ways to make money, like selling palm oil. So there's contention between the two. Okay, an important plot line is that there is a young lady,
Nawi,
played by
Thuso and Mbedu from the Underground Railroad.
She's 19 years old. We see her father trying to sell her to this old man, and she's like, no. And this is not the first time she has fought this topic of like not wanting to be sold into marriage. So her dad takes her to the palace and says, fine, the king can have you. And what that means is young women like her gets taken to the queen to become part of this female army.
Not unlike how girls used to be dropped off at the convent.
So this 19-year-old gets dropped off, and just to make things fast, she becomes like the star soldier. Okay. So one day the general from the Oyo comes to the Dahomey kingdom, mm-hmm. and he basically is like, I'm in charge, run me my money, give me some people. And the king of the Dahomey agrees, like, okay, we're going to do this time, but things need to change. And the Oyo general's like, yeah, right. So he said they agree upon like a certain amount and then 20 like slaves. So Viola goes and picks 20. And one of the 20 is Nawi, mm-hmm. which of course the audience were like, no, because she's like the star soldier. But of course Viola has a plan, because she shows up sometime later to deliver the goods, and she doesn't deliver the treasure or whatever. She delivers that general some severed heads of some of his soldiers, and basically like, I'm here to fight. They fight, neither one wins, they escape, and then things turn worse because the Oyo general gets other kingdoms to join together to fight the Dahomey. Mm-hmm. And then it becomes like a 300 situation. But Viola, her army, and then there's also like a male army, they have a plan that's more strategic, and it works. It causes these other people to retreat.
Well, yeah, they attack them when they're kind of on their way to massacre the Dahomey population, and they have the element of surprise. And,
yes.
Yeah.
So in the process, the Oyo capture some of Viola's people, including Nawi.
Mm-hmm. And Izogie.
Who we find out, Nawi, the 19-year-old, which we can explain later, but we find out, Viola, along with the audience, finds out that that's her daughter. And we can get into it. So, of course, she is very invested in retrieving her people plus her daughter. But when she goes back to the king is like, you've done great work. I'm going to make you like my partner, like you're going to be the woman king. And she's like, well, but first I have to go get these people. And he's like, no, we can sacrifice a few to save the many. You will do what I say. Don't you leave this palace. And of course, that night she leaves. And I thought there are many moments in the film that had me very emotional, but one of those was when Viola just packs up her shit and starts running to go get her people. And then we see some of her soldiers follow her, men and women. That was very moving. And they show up to the slave trade post, and they burn that bitch down. In, again, an amazing scene. It's important to know, there are a lot of coincidences in this film, one of which I don't care for, but one of them is the general of the Oyo tribe, this man.
His name's Oba in the film.
We see that many years ago, Viola's character was captured and like brutally raped multiple times over a period of time. And during that experience, she became pregnant, delivered the baby, and then told one of her associates to get rid of the baby.
Amenza.
Because she can't keep it. And what did this associate do? Give the baby to like a missionary group that then gave it up for adoption. And that's how that girl ended up back at the kingdom, who is now Nawi. Okay. So throughout the film, we get flashbacks of Viola being raped, and we see that it is this general. So this final combat at the end of the film where they're at the slave trade post, of course we get the final battle between Viola and this guy. And of course he gets fucked up. We also see her reunited with Nawi. What?
Not F-bombs.
I know. This movie made me really excited. I might have to bleep one of them, actually. We can only have one, I think. Of course, things go as we hope, which is burns down the slave trade post, gets her daughter, and saves as many people as she can. My favorite character in the film does die, played by Lashana Lynch.
Yeah, she's excellent.
And then we see that, so in 1823, the transatlantic slave trade had already been ended, but there, of course, were still people...
Legally ended, but it's still going on.
Right,
And
so not unlike slavery in the United States.
but the British were trying... You get snippets in the periphery of the dialogue of like, oh, the British are... patrolling the waters and stopping some of these boats from reaching the shore, blah, blah, blah. And the one subplot that you haven't mentioned yet is the Brazilian slave traders that show up.
Right, which I'll mention. But we get the sense with this story in this kingdom that them burning down this slave trade post is like the end of this happening in their kingdom. Then, of course, we see Viola now has been named the Woman King for her efforts. And she is able to enjoy her life with her daughter. Okay, so one thing I didn't mention was the one part I didn't love two things I didn't love. First, the obvious, which is I think there's a little more English spoken than should be.
Sure, I'm sure that there would be some English spoken.
I'm sure the king would speak English and maybe his sort of, close group of people would speak English.
Yeah, because you have to deal with the slave traders.
Right.
Yeah.
But the entire kingdom spoke English. That threw me off a little bit because they do speak some language when they're singing. So that threw me off a little. But there are a lot of coincidences because we have Viola meeting this general who we find out was one of the men who raped her. She becomes pregnant with a child, and that child ends up somehow coming back to her kingdom and becoming the Star Warrior, which is not so unbelievable.
Oh, and that's very much like a Greek tragedy. It's fate as well.
So that worked for me, but then we have this Brazilian slave trader, this white guy, who shows up with an associate.
Malik and Santo.
And it's Santo.
Santo is the white one.
Oh, Malik, we find he's biracial. His father's white. His mother is black African. She was a member of the Dahomey tribe who was a slave. We find out that he is the product of those two, and that his mother's dying wish was for him to visit his kingdom. I felt like that was a little bit much. I don't know what it added to the story, but mainly because that actor...
Jordan Bolger. They rely on the character Malik very heavily in the third act for a catalyst for Nawi to escape.
Yes, because Nawi is about to be sold into slavery, and it is Malik who buys her with the intention of setting her free. So he's important in that regard. But we do get a lot of him, and I think it's that coincidence that felt like an extra layer I didn't need. But also, this man, I think he's a little too attractive because it seems like he'd be the kind of like we find out that his father has means, like his white dad, and he's dressed like someone who doesn't use his hands, but then he is built like a brick house. Yeah, like, it just doesn't make sense.
He's built like somebody that wouldn't necessarily in this period of time have gone through that kind of physical rigor. But
anyway.
And then Santo is played by Hero Fiennes Tiffin, who's a nephew, of course, of Ray Fiennes and Joseph Fiennes in the face of Ferragamo.
Oh, he's very handsome. Although that hair was very Interview with a Vampire.
Sure. Yeah.
Actually, both of them look like they could have been in that movie. Okay. We didn't mention that the king has an assistant, this homosexual, who I thought was very interesting because he plays an integral part. And I think we interpreted that character because he almost has like a two-spirit vibe.
It's almost like he has to shepherd the wives.
Yes, because the king has multiple wives. And it seems like this assistant is sort of the liaison between the wives and the king, but also he has the king's ear because we see Viola going to this homosexual wanting to speak to the king, and it's clear that this assistant respects Viola. So I thought that was nice. I want to talk about Lashana Lynch because I just loved her character so much. I think there are so many great performances in this movie, and they all deserve recognition, but I just thought that character provided the perfect, because this is sort of a hard story to sit through.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say that she provides comedic relief, but she provides some relief in the sense of like hope and joy.
Well, she's very empathetic, you know, like she's the conduit of like, we can make it through this for Nawi.
Oh, I just loved her body language. I liked her facial expressions, just everything about that characterization.
Those wicked nails she has.
Oh, and then she has those stiletto nails that she uses for combat. Oh, I just loved
stabbing eyeballs out. Yeah.
Yes.
And you haven't seen her. She's in the last James Bond movie, No Time to Die, where she basically inherits his number.
Oh.
And she's also in Captain Marvel.
Okay. Well, I definitely like her. Okay. So when all these young girls get sent to the palace to be part of the female army, they of course have to train. And then the final sort of test is this obstacle course from hell. And if they complete it, they're part of the army. I thought this is a solid action film.
Oh yeah, the action's, it's very well choreographed. Yes. It feels like a lot of time and effort was put into it.
But that obstacle course, I mean, again, I was emotional at many points because at one point, Nawi, she wants to win. She's very competitive, but she goes back to help a friend get through one part of the obstacle course. And it's little things like that that really showed like the integrity of her character and that she, you know, she is ambitious, but she does respect the responsibility she's been given. Well, I don't know. I just really liked how that character played out.
She plays this theme of divorcing herself from the ideas of Viola's character's name is Nanisca, who they're like, you can't go back and help people, blah, 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 but sometimes to go forward, you have to go back.
And she Nawi challenges her mother. So, oh yes, and every scene with the two of them, because without Viola knowing that's her daughter, she still is very nurturing towards her.
Well, she has a very begrudging respect for her.
Yes, and I thought that played out very well. Getting back to the English being spoken, there is a scene where the Santo, the Portuguese slave trader, he's with the king talking, and he's talking to, I believe, Malik in Portuguese, and the king says, when you're in my you must speak my language when you're in my palace. But then he's speaking English. I thought that was funny. But I understand that it's like, well, you're speaking a language I don't speak.
Sure, I don't know that the Brazilian slave trader would know the tribal dialect, but I think they were making a kind of statement there.
So, how did Viola know this is her daughter? Because when Viola delivered the baby 19 years prior, before she gave the baby away, she marked it by like cutting into the baby's left shoulder and like implanting a shark's tooth because she was wearing a shark's tooth necklace. So when she suspects that this 19-year-old is her daughter, she cuts open her shoulder and pulls out the shark tooth. And, you know, just saying it sounds kind of ridiculous, but it plays out in a very logical way that I thought was very well done. Yeah.
No, a lot of, I think, really fierce performances from a lot of great women in this, where a lot of times some of those supporting characters, the more you branch out, kind of lose heft. But
Oh, my next note is the Amazons in Wonder Woman, like the Wonder Woman movie, when we see those Amazonian women in whatever world they live in, they could never be this bad. Like these
well,
women.
they also didn't have to be. Like these women were fighting for something. There's a lot more at stake.
Sure, but thinking about the scenes in Wonder Woman where those Amazonian women are fighting, it's just like, I mean, that ain't shit compared to this movie.
But I mean, I think that's also in the filmography of Gina Prince-Bythewood why something like The Old Guard doesn't quite work, but the level of humanity that is evident in all of her other films is so much more potent.
That's all I have to say, really. I would highly recommend this movie. I would definitely watch it again. There are a lot of messages that I feel like we could spend a lot of time talking about, from these Black Africans selling their people into the slave trade and the complexity of that topic, because surely...
Well, yeah, because because it made me read a little bit about the Dahomey, and it's a very fascinating history that isn't really explored in film, or hasn't been heretofore. That's really interesting about because King Ghezo was overthrew the government that his brother. Technically, his brother was the king with the help of the Brazilian slave traders, and how they're playing with it because they know that they will lose their wealth if they don't kind of deal in human bodies and what that means. And
right.
But even beyond that, there were all kinds of sacrificial rituals, which is very much like the Mayans in Apocalypto, and how they would just these people that would just steal from other tribes and use them for slaughter, and how really that isn't that all that does is cause the internal collapse of a kingdom. Like somebody has a really good line, I think it's Viola has a really good line of it. This is a slow poison that is eating away at us.
Yeah. So a very complex topic. Another interesting topic is the Dahomey king Boyega. We're told that he's considered conservative. Because he rules by what he thinks the gods would want. Ironically, what the gods would want, we would consider to be actually more progressive. Namely, that he believes in equality amongst genders. Not full equality, because obviously he's allowing young girls to be sold into marriage in his kingdom. But he believes that women should be allowed to fight and should be respected like men. And that there could be a woman king.
Well, there once was a tradition where
yes.
there was a woman king, and there hasn't been one appointed that for a while.
Right, so we hear one of the soldiers talk about that and saying that if there ever was going to be a woman king, it would be this king who would appoint her. And then, of course, in the end, because we're not sure, because he was going to appoint Viola, but then he told her, don't you leave this palace, but of course she does, and burns down the slave trade.
And there's also another subplot going on with his the main wife is Shante, played by Jayme Lawson, who's also kind of gunning for that role. Yeah.
But then when she comes back in another really good scene, when you hire Viola, you're getting one really good monologue, and I think it's when she comes back and talks about what they've done, and and he announces her as the woman king. I thought that was a very good scene.
Yeah, a lot of very, very poignant scenes interspersed with the action, which is kind of rare, really. But thinking back of how it's funny to think that this king was considered conservative, it's kind of like, Abe Lincoln was a Republican.
Yeah. So, I mean, just a lot going on. Oh, and then the juxtaposition of this, because these female soldiers are told that they cannot interact with men. Of course, they have to abstain from relations with men, cannot bear children, that their focus is as warriors. But then seeing that the main one had a child and how she's dealing with that, I thought that was very, very interesting.
Well, and we haven't even really talked about her kind of helpmate, her right-hand man, if you will, is Amenza, played by Sheila Atim, who is also a really great screen presence.
Oh, she's, I mean, so many great performances. Do you have anything else to say?
It was shot, I think it looks really good too. It was shot by Polly Morgan, who was recently lends Lucy in the Sky. I find the most interesting element being the script by Dana Stevens, who's a white lady, who's written several notable screenplays, the last one being that Kevin Hart movie I didn't like, Fatherhood. But Maria Bello, of all people, has story credit as well, which I found interesting.
This movie feels epic, which I think is impressive for the budget, which I understand is like around 50 million. This movie feels expensive and grand, so good job. What would you give it?
I think 3.5.
I would give it 3.5 as well, so I think it's very good. Hit the thanks button, listen to our podcast. Bye.